My sister sued me for revealing her secret pregnancy. I fought through family betrayal, legal warfare, guilt, and the hard road to rebuild trust. I never imagined a legal summons could feel like a punch to the gut before I even read it. My name is Emma Caldwell. I'm 29, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I was sorting through junk mail on a Wednesday morning when I spotted the official-looking envelope. Legal notice, stamped across the front in ominous red. My heart slammed against my ribs as I tore it open, half expecting a parking ticket, but finding instead a lawsuit filed by my own sister, accusing me of defamation and breach of privacy for revealing her pregnancy. The words blurred as disbelief and panic surged. She wants damages and a public apology. How did we go from shared secrets to court filings? I sank onto the edge of the couch, the summons shaking in my hand. In that instant, I was transported back to the closeness we once had, sleepovers in our small Portland apartment, whispered conversations about dreams and fears late at night. I remembered the whisper she used when she first confided in me, a trembling voice, eyes darting like she expected someone to overhear. That memory hit harder now. Why did she hide it so desperately despite trusting me enough to tell? The notice spelled out allegations. I broadcast her secret, humiliated her, violated her privacy. Fear knotted in my stomach as guilt followed. Did I really betray her trust? My mind jumped to the flashback, me in her cramped apartment rummaging for coffee when I noticed the faint line on a test left on the counter. I'd backed away, heart racing, and confronted her in hushed tones. She pleaded, "Please don't tell anyone, not yet," I promised. But later, maybe in a stressed late-night text to a friend, I'd let something slip, a vague mention that I was worried about someone close to me. I never meant to expose her fully, but somehow it spread. Now here we were, siblings at war in a courtroom context. I reread the demand for a public apology. Public apology. My chest tightened. Exposing our family drama to the world felt impossible, yet the threat loomed. I thought of her fear. Maybe she was terrified of judgment from parents or our tightly knit circles. Maybe the timing felt wrong for her. And I believed I was helping. I thought secrecy might mean she skipped medical appointments or sank deeper into anxiety. But the summons called me reckless betrayer. I flinched, imagining relatives whispering, friends taking sides. A cold wave of dread. What if this rift is irreparable? My phone buzzed with texts I hadn't opened, probably from family after someone leaked news. I felt torn, guilt that I hurt her, confusion at why she kept something so vital secret, and panic over what lies ahead. Legal fees, strained relationships, sleepless nights, none of it had felt real until now. The emptiness around me in my living room felt heavier. I was alone in wrestling with both love and fear, unsure where to turn first. I pressed the summons flat on the coffee table, staring at the typed lines that reduced years of sisterhood to accusations and demands. The paper felt heavier than any brick. I swallowed hard, realizing this was the inciting moment. Our bond laid bare in legal terms, and I had to decide what to do next. But before I could even think of calling a lawyer, I heard my own trembling whisper, "How did we end up here?" And the room seemed to answer with silence, as if daring me to find out. What comes next feels impossible to predict, and I'm terrified to try. I never saw the day coming when my sister's laughter felt like a stranger's echo. Growing up, we were inseparable. Weekend bike rides through Selwood, late-night talks in our cramped bedroom about dreams of travel and love. But over the past year, I sensed a shift, small things at first. She'd hang up abruptly when I asked how she was, or glance at her phone whenever I walked into the room. I brushed it off as stress. New job, new friends, maybe something I couldn't understand. Still, a knot formed in my chest whenever I tried to reach out. I remember the first time I noticed real distance. We were in her kitchen. I offered to cook dinner like old times, but she declined. Her voice was clipped. "I'm fine, Emma." I forced a smile, stirring pasta on the stove. Later, I found her texting frantically, then slipping the phone into her pocket when I turned around. I felt my concern rise into suspicion. Was she hiding more than just a rough day? Guilt flickered. Was I prying too much? But the memory of her hesitance kept me uneasy long after the smell of marinara faded. We're past disagreements that should have been warnings. Last Christmas, I teased her about still living at home. She'd snapped, "It's not your business." I'd laughed it off, but the sting lingered. I chalked it up to holiday stress, thinking we'd get back to normal soon. But I didn't notice how often she'd pull away. Fewer texts, fewer invites to coffee. When I asked about it, she'd say everything was fine, and I trusted her words. Now I wonder if I was blind to signs I should have seen. Late-night flashbacks often replay. Me scrolling through her social media, nodding cryptic posts, half emojis, vague mentions of feeling overwhelmed. I wanted to ask directly, but I hesitated, worried I'd push her further away. So I hovered at the edge, sending check-in messages she sometimes read without replying. I told myself I gave her space, but deep down I feared missing something critical. I convinced myself that sisters share everything, but maybe she felt I was intruding on territory she wasn't ready to share. I recall once offering advice about a crush or career choice. She snapped that I didn't know her life. It felt unfair. I thought I was helping. Afterward, I wondered, was my concern unwelcome? I told myself to step back, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter. When someone you love becomes secretive, every silence screams. and I feared the worst even before I discovered the pregnancy. Maybe she was in trouble and wouldn't let me in. Now, with the lawsuit in hand, I traced those fractures backward, searching for the moment things shifted irreversibly. Each memory stings, my misreads her hidden pain. I question whether my probing, even if well-meaning, built walls instead of bridges. And I realize that closeness isn't guaranteed. Trust can erode slowly until you find yourself facing someone you thought you knew. My mind spins. Was there ever a warning I ignored? Or was the distance always there, disguised as everyday life? As I sit here in my apartment, replaying our last normal conversation, her soft laugh, my teasing remark, I wonder, did I push too hard or did she retreat too far? And if I couldn't see the tension then, how did I miss the crisis brewing underneath? The memory tightens around me like a noose, and I feel the weight of every unanswered question. What truly drove her into secrecy, and could I have changed course before it was too late? The unease settles in my bones, leaving me dreadfully aware that understanding the past might be my only chance to salvage what's left. What if I still can't fix it? I never intended to become an unwelcome detective in my sister's life, but that afternoon changed everything. I was grabbing a glass of water in her bathroom when I noticed the small white stick tucked behind shampoo bottles. My heart stuttered. A faint yet unmistakable plus sign stared back at me. I spun around to find her in the doorway, face pale, eyes wide with panic. In that instant, I knew I'd crossed an invisible line, but I couldn't unsee what I saw. "Emma," she whispered, voice trembling. She backed away, pressing the door partly closed. I raised my hand slowly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." My throat felt tight. She looked smaller than I remembered. "I was just getting water and—" My words trailed off, guilt burning my cheeks. Stepped into the bathroom, shutting the door fully. "You have to promise you won't tell anyone," she said, voice cracking. I nodded, though inside my mind a storm brewed, a mix of relief that she'd confided, anxiety for her, and dread about what secrets lay ahead. "I promise," I said, forcing calm. She sank onto the closed lid of the toilet, wrapping her arms around herself. "I can't handle judgment right now," she murmured. I crouched in front of her, heart pounding. "I understand. I'm here, whatever you need." She exhaled shakily, eyes flicking away. In that moment, I vowed to protect her secret. For the next days, I hovered close, checking in with gentle texts, "Coffee soon," offering to drive her to appointments if she'd let me. She thanked me but demurred every time. I sensed her fear, maybe of family gossip, maybe of something darker, but I convinced myself my concern was justified. I wanted her safe. Yet I felt the tension. I tiptoed around any slip of the tongue, feeling hyper-aware of every action and message. One evening, anxious over her silence, I messaged my closest friend, Mara. "Hey, I'm worried about Elle. She's been distant. I think something up but can't talk details yet." I didn't say pregnant, but I hinted at unseen trouble. Mara responded with typical concern, speculating lightly about stress or a relationship issue. The next morning, I scrolled social media and froze. Someone had posted a vague comment about someone close expecting, captioned with an emoji of surprise. It wasn't my post, but I realized my words to Mara had seeded whispers beyond our circle. Panic flared. I deleted my message threads, but the rumor had already begun to spread. Confronted Mara gently over text. "I didn't mean for this to go anywhere. Can you ask people to stop talking?" Her reply was sympathetic but helpless. Once words escape, you can't reel them back. My chest tightened. I thought I was protecting my sister. Instead, I'd set off a chain reaction. I replayed the bathroom moment, wishing I'd never seen that test. The tension between my promise and the reality I'd unleashed twisted inside me. Later that day, I saw my sister's name flash on my phone with a message. "We need to talk now." My stomach lurched. When I arrived at her apartment, the air felt electric. She opened the door, eyes red. Without greeting, she thrust her phone at me, showing forwarded texts from family, speculation about a baby. Her voice trembled as she asked how I could let this happen. I stumbled over words. I didn't say it outright, I tried to be careful. But she cut me off. "You're the only one I trusted." Now everyone knows. Her pain was raw, betrayal etched deep. I reached out, but she stepped back, closing the door between us. Outside, rain began to fall lightly, matching the ache in my chest. I pressed my forehead against the cool door, recalling my promise and the unintended breach. My mind raced. How had my attempt to be supportive turned into the very betrayal she feared? I felt the weight of her anger and my own horror at the fallout. I realized there was no turning back. The secret was out, and our bond trembled on the edge of collapse. I took a shaky breath and sent a message I feared she'd never read. "I'm so sorry. I'll fix this, I swear." But deep down, I knew apologies might not be enough. The door remained closed, and I was left in the hallway, drenched by rain and dread, uncertain how to undo the damage I had caused. The next step felt impossible, yet unavoidable, and I had no choice but to face it. Never imagined answering my phone would feel like stepping into a battlefield. Within hours of the leak, messages flooded in. Terse texts from relatives demanding explanations, hushed group chats where my name was whispered like a scandalous headline. My thumb hovered over each notification, dread knotting my stomach. I knew family news spread fast, but this was wildfire fueled by betrayal. I braced myself, reading one accusatory message after another. "How could you? You ruined her life. This is unforgivable." Each ping felt like another blow. When my mother called, voice trembling, I tried to explain but was cut off by frantic sobs. She'd talked to my sister's friends, who believed the worst about motives. My father remained silent, his texts a single, "We need to discuss this." Even my closest friends wavered. Some urged me to apologize publicly, others whispered that I'd overstepped beyond repair. I paced my living room, imagining everyone's faces at upcoming gatherings, eyes narrowed in judgment, conversations halting when I walked in. And the formal notice arrived, a letter from my sister's attorney advising me to secure legal counsel. Reading the legalese made my chest tighten further. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. I felt the weight of potential damages, the prospect of a lawsuit turning sibling strife into a courtroom spectacle. I hesitated before calling a lawyer, ashamed that I'd let it escalate. But the notice made clear, ignoring it could be worse. At a weekend family gathering meant to celebrate Aunt June's birthday, tension was palpable. I arrived late, avoiding eye contact. Small talk felt impossible. Greetings were curt, forks hovered over plates as if suspended by tension. My aunt tried to steer conversation to innocuous topics, but undercurrents ran deep. When I finally faced my sister across the table, she looked away, jaw clenched. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain why I acted as I did, but words felt hollow in that charged silence. During the meal, relatives exchanged glances. My cousin leaned in to ask quietly if I'd considered withdrawing from social media entirely. Another suggested a private apology note to my sister. Publicly, she said nothing, but the weight of judgment pressed down like a lead cloak. Every laugh felt forced, every smile brittle. I wondered if I could salvage any semblance of normalcy or if I was already exiled in plain sight. Back in my apartment that evening, I opened advice articles about family lawsuits, trying to steel myself for next steps. I thought of my sister's fear. Maybe she felt vulnerable, alone, and lashing out seemed her only option. I also remembered worrying about her health. Missed doctor visits and cryptic texts convinced me secrecy endangered her. Now I questioned whether my intentions mattered once trust was shattered. Could concern ever justify exposure? The doubt gnawed at me. Mediator's invitation arrived. My sister's lawyer proposed mediation before court. I felt torn, relief at a chance to avoid public trial, but terror at seeing her again under legal terms. What if family showed up as witnesses, fueling more conflict? Yet ignoring it risked default judgment. I scribbled pros and cons in a voice memo, cost of legal fees, emotional toll, possibility of reconciliation. Each option felt fraught. Late at night, I stared at old photos on my phone, us as kids, smiling on the beach, sharing secrets and whispers. Those images felt from a different world, one where trust was a given. Now, the pregnancy revelation had fractured more than privacy. It shook the foundation of our bond and the family's unity. I lay awake imagining the mediation room, sister across the table, eyes wary, lawyers hovering. My heart pounded at the thought. This meeting could decide our future, whether we find a path forward or deepen the chasm between us. I closed my eyes, breathing shallowly, knowing I must prepare for that confrontation, though I feared what truths might surface next. Silence of my apartment pressed in on me like a verdict. Alone in the dim light, I replayed conversations and choices, my phone glowing with unread messages and reminders of unresolved tension. Guilt coiled in my chest. Was I a protector or a betrayer? I sank onto the couch, eyes fixed on the wall, recalling moments when I convinced myself that prying could save her. Now, each memory felt double-edged, a plea to help or an excuse for intrusion. Remembered late nights paging through my own voice memos as I rationalized my actions. She's missing appointments. What if something's wrong? I only mentioned I was worried, not that she's pregnant. In those recordings, my voice had sounded steady, certain I was right. But hindsight revealed how easily concern can morph into overreach. I thought of the times I misread her silence as danger signals, when maybe she simply needed space. Those blurred lines haunted me. Where does caring end and violation begin? Flipping through old journal entries, I found passages about our childhood closeness, shared secrets, whispered dreams under blanket forts. Beneath them lay notations of friction, sharp words exchanged after I teased her about life choices, her frustration when I insisted on advice. I questioned if my protective instincts were tinged with pride. Did I believe I knew what was best for her, or did I truly fear for her well-being? The answer felt tangled. Love and control, empathy and intrusion, all entwined until I couldn't tell them apart. Thought about the lawsuit's demands, a public apology, damages, an admission of wrongdoing. Part of me ached to swallow pride and comply, apologize unreservedly, drop the case, maybe salvage family peace. Yet another part rebelled. If I admitted full fault without context, I'd erase the reasons I thought I acted rightly. I wrestled with the fear of losing more than money, losing my voice, my ability to explain that I believed secrecy could harm her and her unborn child. Could I bear the weight of silence that glossed over the deeper issues I'd perceived? Night after night, I weighed scenarios, apologizing with no qualifiers, hoping she'd accept and we'd rebuild slowly, offering to share context privately, risking further betrayal if she felt I justified my breach, or fighting to present evidence of her struggles, potentially exposing more family wounds and making the conflict uglier. Each path promised pain, either guilt for hurting her further or guilt for keeping silent about what I saw. I realized there was no easy way to untangle this knot. As I drafted a tentative apology in my mind, my finger hovered over the record button on my phone. Should I record a heartfelt message acknowledging my mistake and expressing willingness to step back? Or should I prepare notes for the mediation, outlining concerns about her missed checkups, mental health hints, and everything I thought justified my worry? The thought of facing her lawyer and mine in a sterile room filled me with dread, yet avoiding that moment meant surrendering control over my narrative. Was it fair to let others decide without my voice heard? I closed my eyes, breath shallow, feeling the full weight of choices ahead. The lawsuit loomed like a crossroads: apologize and risk burying truths I felt mattered, or stand my ground and risk widening the rift. I realized that whatever I chose, I might lose her, and maybe more: respect from family, my own peace of mind. Dawn approached, and with it, the need to decide. My trembling hand reached for my laptop to draft either an apology letter or a mediation brief. But before I could type a single word, my heart whispered the hardest question: could I live with whatever came next? The uncertainty pressed in, and I knew the real battle was just beginning. I walked into the mediation room with my stomach twisted into knots, feeling the weight of every choice I'd made pressing on me like stones in a backpack. Across the polished table, my sister sat rigid, her eyes cold yet glistening with hurt. Lawyers flanked us on either side, and a neutral mediator at the head offered a curt nod before inviting us to speak. The air smelled faintly of coffee and tension. This was the moment everything converged. And the mediator asked my sister to open. Her voice trembled but carried fierce accusation. "You betrayed me. You humiliated me in front of everyone I care about." She laid out her pain plainly, how she felt exposed, vulnerable, and abandoned. I watched her hands clench the table's edge, knuckles white. My heart pounded. These were the raw wounds I'd feared but hadn't fully grasped until now. When it was my turn, I inhaled slowly, searching for steady ground in my swirling thoughts. "I'm sorry," I began, voice shaking though I tried to keep it calm. "I thought I was protecting you. I saw signs, missed doctor appointments, erratic messages, and I believed secrecy might endanger you or the baby. I never intended to hurt you." I paused as my words sank into the silence, aware that apology alone couldn't erase the breach. I shared the fears that drove me, memories of her isolated moments, the unease that led me to reach out. I spoke honestly but without blaming her choices, trying to convey that my actions, however misguided, were born of concern. She responded with tears, accusing me of deciding for her, of overriding her autonomy. "You took away my choice to share when I was ready," she said, voice breaking. "No matter your intentions, you robbed me of control over my life." I felt a stab of regret. She was right that I'd imposed my judgment, yet I also believed there were unseen pressures she couldn't acknowledge. Mediator gently asked if there were deeper issues at play, and for a moment the tension shifted as my sister's expression flickered, fear mingled with relief. She confessed, voice hushed. "I was scared. After Dad's panic attacks when Mom found out about my last crisis, I promised myself I'd handle things alone." She revealed she'd been battling anxiety and a toxic relationship with someone pressuring her about the pregnancy. Suddenly, the courtroom framing felt smaller than the emotional labyrinth we inhabited. Hearing her admit fear and shame cut through my resolve. The sister I loved was frightened, not just angry. My own eyes stung as I realized how little I'd known of her inner battles. I voiced understanding. "I wish you told me about him, about how unsafe you felt. But I also wish you'd let me in before things got worse." My words hung between us, neither full apology nor justification, but an offering of truth. The mediator asked if we could agree on next steps. Perhaps a statement acknowledging mutual pain, confidentiality going forward, and some form of repair without public spectacle. My sister hesitated, tears pooling as she stared at the table. I sensed the moment tipping. If she accepted a mediated apology and boundaries, we might avoid court. If not, we'd escalate into litigation that could deepen wounds. I felt fear over the unknown. Would a private resolution suffice, or would unsaid resentments linger? Family members watching from the hallway, my mother's trembling gaze, my father's silent struggle, added gravity. I realized our conflict was more than legal. It was a fracture in trust that mediation could only begin to mend. Mediator asked, "Can you both agree on a statement that acknowledges hurt and outlines steps to move forward, or do you need formal proceedings?" My sister's gaze met mine, hard to read. In that suspended moment, I felt the culmination of our tangled past, childhood closeness overshadowed by secrets and missteps, and the fragile possibility of a different path. My throat tightened as I waited for her answer. A settlement here could spare us public battle, but demand humility and patience as we rebuild. Refusal would mean stepping into court, where wounds might bleed wider. I clenched my fists under the table, bracing for her decision. The air grew still, and I realized that whatever came next would shape not only this case, but whatever remained of our relationship. And in that silence, I found myself holding onto a fragile hope, even as dread coiled in my chest, waiting for her voice to break the stillness. My heart felt hollow the morning after mediation, as if the room's tension had followed me home. I awoke to the faint hum of my phone, dreading the messages that awaited. The mediator's proposal, a joint statement acknowledging hurt and agreeing on confidentiality, had been accepted by my sister, but the relief was brittle. I read the drafted words over and over. We both expressed pain. I took responsibility for my actions. She acknowledged her fear, but the lines between us still felt jagged. Even the act of agreeing felt like a small surrender. I had to admit fault in public-facing terms I'd once resisted, and she had to concede some context without exposing everything. That afternoon, I sent the agreed-upon statement to family group chats, a short note asking them to respect our privacy and refrain from speculation. Responses were polite but cautious. Some relatives replied with brief, "Thank you for clarifying." Others fell silent. In my living room, I stared at my reflection in the dark window, wondering if those few sentences could truly contain the damage. I recalled my sister's eyes in mediation, tearful but resolved, and I tried to imagine how she felt reading the same words. Did they comfort her or feel like another compromise of autonomy? I couldn't know, and that uncertainty tightened my chest. The days that followed, life resumed in fits and starts. I returned to work, but my mind wandered. Every alert on my phone made me flinch. A coworker asked if I was okay after noticing my distracted gaze. I forced a smile and said I was dealing with family matters. Friends reached out gingerly, not certain whether to bring it up. I sensed some withdrew, unsure how to support me without taking sides. The distance between people I'd known felt more visible now, as though the leak had not only fractured my sister, but rippled outward, altering how others saw me. My sister retreated deeper. Her responses to my texts were brief, polite, but guarded. She thanked me for respecting confidentiality, then went silent. I resisted the urge to fill the gap with messages, reminding myself that pressing might feel like another intrusion. Yet every time my phone lay idle, I imagined her loneliness or anger growing. I worried about her well-being, but feared risking more fallout by reaching out. That tension became its own punishment. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old photos, us at family barbecues, laughing with abandon. Each image now felt tinged with loss. I recorded a voice memo, summarizing my reflections, regret for the breach, gratitude for the chance to settle privately, and fear that trust might never fully return. Listening back, I realized I sounded hollow, my words earnest but lacking the warmth we once shared. I saved the memo without sending. It was a confession to myself more than anything else. Months passed with slow, uneasy rhythms. My sister and I met once for a brief coffee, no grand gestures, just quiet conversation about neutral topics. We avoided the pregnancy entirely, though I sensed we both felt its shadow every time our eyes flickered. I offered support for her baby in a careful, boundary-aware way. I sent a small gift with a note that said I was here if she needed anything. Her reply was polite. "Thank you, I appreciate it." But the distance remained. I realized that even with the lawsuit behind us, the emotional fallout lingered. Some relatives resumed casual contact, but I noticed subtle shifts, a reserved tone, an absent invitation here and there. The lesson settled in. Reconciliation isn't a single act but a slow process, and not all wounds heal completely. Yet in quiet moments I felt a flicker of hope. We'd found a way through mediation without public spectacle, and small gestures might, over time, rebuild trust. As I lay awake one night, I wondered if our cautious steps forward would ever erase the memory of betrayal, or if the scar would always remind us how fragile trust can be. And I realized that living with that uncertainty might be the price of both care and honesty, a price I was now resigned to pay. Mornings, the silence still feels louder than any courtroom verdict. It's been months since mediation, and I'm in my small Portland apartment, staring at a blank document labeled to L. I decide to write a letter, knowing I might never send it. I begin by acknowledging the distance between us, the empty space in our shared memories, the careful caution in her replies. I write plainly, without excuses. I regret the pain I caused, and I'm grateful she agreed to settle privately. I admit I misunderstood her needs and overstepped, yet I explain that my fear for her well-being stemmed from caring too much. Each sentence carries the weight of everything unsaid between us. Recall late nights when I feared for her alone, weighing whether to respect her privacy or intervene. I confess in the letter that I now understand how autonomy matters, even when I believed I knew what was best. I offer support for her baby on her terms. I'll help if she asks and step back if she needs space. I avoid blaming or justifying too heavily, aiming instead to show empathy. I tell her I see her strength in handling hard truths alone, even if it hurt me. I acknowledge that trust can't be restored by words alone. It demands time and consistent respect for boundaries. As I type, I glance around at items I associate with our past. A photo of us on the beach as kids, a mug she gave me for my birthday. Each object feels charged with memory, warmth, and loss entwined. I pause the letter to reflect on my own growth, how I've learned that love sometimes means letting go of control. I admit I still worry about her, but I resolve to check in lightly, without expectations. I imagine sending the letter or recording a voice message. Either way, I accept that she might not respond, or that her reply may be cautious. I steel myself for uncertainty. For closing, I write a final paragraph. I hope she knows I'm here, ready to listen without judgment. I mention that I've begun therapy to understand my patterns of concern and intrusion, showing I'm taking responsibility beyond mere words. I tell her I'll respect her pace if reconciliation is possible, or accept silence if that's what she needs. Writing these lines brings a lump in my throat. It feels like both an ending and a tentative beginning. I save the draft and sit back, heart pounding as I consider the vulnerability of this gesture. Later, I record a voice memo echoing the letter's tone, steady, calm, though my voice cracks at moments. I speak of scars we carry, hers from feeling exposed, mine from guilt and loss. I say that I won't erase what happened, but will honor what remains of our bond in whatever form she allows. I end with a simple promise. I'm here, sister, whenever you're ready. I send the memo into the ether, uncertain if it reaches her heart or fades into unread messages. Days pass. I check my phone less often, resisting the urge to follow up immediately. When her short reply arrives, "Thank you. I hear you," I feel a fragile relief. It's not a reunion, but a sign she's still present. I respond lightly, avoiding pressure, expressing that I appreciate her response. Then I let our conversation rest. I understand trust rebuilds in small moments, not grand gestures. In quiet evenings, I think of her and the baby, wondering how she's navigating motherhood. I imagine she might need help someday, practical or emotional, and I hope she'll ask. If not, I'll respect her choice. I accept that some wounds can't fully close but can soften over time. As I close my laptop for the night, I feel a cautious hope that honesty and empathy, even imperfect, can plant seeds for something new. And though I don't know what tomorrow brings for us, I carry the lesson that caring must always honor the other's voice, even when it trembles in silence.